Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, my name is Larry Lawson. I'm the host of this show, coming to you from Vero Beach, Florida, the home office of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings. If you're ever interested in checking us out a little bit, you can go to our website at IndianRiverHauntings.com. You can also check us out on Facebook at Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings, and our YouTube channel at Indian River Hauntings 2341 if you want to see what else that we're up to out there. But really glad to have everybody back tonight. You know, we cover all kinds of subjects here in Paranormal Stakeout. It's not just ghosts, but it's anything outside the norms of science. And tonight, bringing to you a very interesting and compelling story. My guest is Pat O'Connell. She is a communications consultant for many high-tech corporations, and in varied fields such as nuclear power, aerospace, antibody library solutions. She's a researcher, a novelist, an author. She's involved in all kinds of things, and she's also a paranormal investigator. And I am really, really happy to have with us tonight Pat O'Connell. So, Pat, welcome to Paranormal Stakeout.
Thanks, Larry. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you've got such an interesting story. And I'd like to get into that. But before we do that, I'd like my audience to learn a little bit about who Pat O'Connell is. And in addition, your brother. I want to hear a little bit about Jimmy. So share with us, if you would.
Well, you know, you think I'm more special than I think I am, but you know, I've been a writer and a communications consultant for over 30 years, doing marketing and training and you know, all kinds of technical things and websites and even process development, helping people. It used to be called efficiency experts, you know, okay. making untangling your systems and making them work more efficiently. My daughter is now doing basically the same thing as what you call a Scrum Master now in software. So you know, kind of pass that down a little bit, but you know, and I'm a skeptic. I'm a skeptic, but I am the good kind of skeptic. I am open to evidence, and I'm not a pushover, but I am open-minded to all kinds of possibilities, and I'm fascinated with the idea. You know, you're researching ghosts. I've done ghost hunts, but then, you know, the skeptic in me debunks some of the things that some of the evidence that I allegedly collected. And
we need to follow the evidence, don't we?
Right. But the whole point of doing that to me is to get rid of the garbage so that the real mysteries pop out in great relief. So I'm looking for the real mysteries. And that's why I love this story that Jim got me involved in. And
how did you get involved in the paranormal? What got you, besides your brother, other than Jim? I mean, any past experiences?
We grew up with parents that were open to all kinds of things. I mean, we used to watch, it was a Darren McGavin show, a TV series. Night Stalker, right. It was so campy and goofy, but we loved it. And, you know, in the first great Northeast blackout in 1965, we were living in a house that was 270 years old. And so, I mean, it had a lot of history from the early days. It was an old inn on the Boston Post Road, and the Marquis de Lafayette and Benjamin Franklin had been at our house. So, there was all kinds of history there. So everybody kind of gathered at our house. We had this we had actually several giant fireplaces. And so we had a big fire going in the den, and we were listening to transistor radio. And one of our friends, one of my brothers and my friends from high school, came in, as all of the kids in the neighborhood did. They just came in like it was their house. And he said he had seen a UFO that night. And I had forgotten about that till Jimmy mentioned it. And that reminded Jimmy that he had, and my brother was an experiencer. He was an abductee. And so
Jimmy's your brother. Jimmy's your brother.
He was my youngest brother. And so talking about this, remembering the blackout, and remembering that our friend had seen a UFO made him start thinking about the fact that he might have had his first encounter, his first abduction, not that year, but maybe a couple of years later when he was still a kid. Because he just kind of disappeared from, my mother had sent him over to the store. It was like 2 houses away, and he didn't come back for hours and hours, and he didn't know where he'd been.
Well, let's back up just a little bit. You had kids over at your house. One of the friends said they saw a UFO. How did that involve Jimmy?
Right.
I'm not sure.
Well, it did. When Jimmy and I were talking about the blackout, we were recalling the blackout and how much fun we had that night. And he said, do you remember when Pete said on the way over he had seen a UFO in about the same place that my brother, actually my 2 youngest brothers, had seen their first UFOs over the grocery store. So that just kind of, Jimmy had come for years and years. He thought he was just having these really vivid dreams, until one day somebody said, have you ever thought that they might be dreams? So he was dreaming about, having these abduction kind of dreams, but he never allowed himself to consider that they were real until this friend had mentioned it. And when he started looking at it from that perspective, he found out that his wife was also having experiences on the same nights he was having these abduction dreams or these abduction experiences. And, she smelled a certain smell that actually Jimmy got on the phone with Whitley Strieber in 1991, the year of the big solar eclipse, that there were all the multiple sightings over Mexico City. I don't know if you remember that. Or maybe maybe you're too young for that, but there was this TV show, and you could call in, and Whitley happened to be a guest on it. And Whitley, I'm sure your audience knows, is one of the probably the most famous abductee, the author of the Communion books and all that. And so Jimmy called in and was talking about his wife having this experience. And Whitley confirmed it, but he was a little uncomfortable because it was one of those things that it's like, and you being a former law enforcement officer, sometimes you withhold pieces of evidence because only the perpetrator will know, or only somebody on the inside will know. And Jimmy asked Whitley a question on this TV show, and Whitley was kind of uncomfortable about it. And he said, we don't talk about that. And it was nothing big, but it was just something to confirm that other families are having that same experience, where the partner who's not being abducted experiences other things. I mean, one morning my sister-in-law was making the bed, and the bed was full of leaves. And, she's like, okay, I don't know how this happens, but,
Okay, so he's had these experiences. He spoke to Whitley Strieber. What happened after that?
Well, after that, I think he started seriously accepting the reality of the abduction. And then he realized that there were millions of other people who had the same experience and didn't have any acknowledgement, didn't have any respect. That, you know, it tore their lives apart in some cases. So he started talking to people, and you know, he connected with them all over the world on Facebook and other social media. And so that's when he decided he wanted to create a TV show, a reality show that would tell these people's story. And he said he would get really frustrated because he said, everybody wants to know, how is this different from other UFO stories? And he said, it's not about the vehicles. If somebody famous showed up at your door, you're not going to say, oh, hi, it's nice to see you. What? Let me go look at your car. You know, so he wanted to do a show that told the abductees stories and gave them credibility and compassion. And so
What year was this? What year was
oh
this?
gosh, he started doing that, I don't know, probably 2010 or earlier than that. I mean, 2005, it could have been earlier than that. I can't remember exactly when he started very seriously developing the story and seeking funding from investors and learning all about, you know, the media business, which is a big mess of politics and drama. And, you know, he went through several false starts with investors who then sabotaged the thing or wanted it to be something else. And I'm sure anybody who's ever done this has experienced those kinds of issues.
Okay. So he's and from what I understand too, he attended a couple of conferences and started seeing people that he had actually seen during his abduction dreams, for lack of a better word.
Yes, and he talked to one woman that was describing an event where she was abducted. She saw a man in the ship, another human in the ship where she was had been abducted and was being tested or whatever they were doing to her. And you know, he had only spoken to her on the phone, and they were both supposed to go to a UFO conference, and he did. He went to all these conferences, and when he ran into her, he didn't recognize her, but she recognized him. She said, "It's you. You're the guy that was in the ship when I was abducted." So that was really interesting.
Well, we're about ready to come up on our next break, and we've heard a lot about your brother Jimmy, but Jimmy actually turned you on to a story that you began to research and get involved in with yourself, and that's a guy by the name of Clay Wheeler,
Clay
I believe,
Wheeler.
right?
Right.
So, what did Jimmy just called you one day and said, "Hey, you got to check this out"?
Right. He called me. It was in early 2015, and he said, "You know, I've got this case, and it's in Texas." Now, Jimmy was in Connecticut, and I'm here in Texas. And he said, "This guy's story is so much bigger than I can do in a 1-hour TV show or even a multiple episode arc. And would you be interested in first checking him out, you know, meeting with him and vetting him, make sure he's not,
Oh,
you know, out there crazy?"
well, we got to take our first break now. So when we get back, let's start talking about Clay Wheeler. So stay with us,
Okay.
folks. More to come on Paranormal Stakeout. We'll be back after these messages.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, on the X-Zone Radio Show, as together we will investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. Join me and my special guests from around the world each and every night as we investigate UFOs, ghosts, psychics, Bigfoot, conspiracies, and much, much more. Dare to believe and dare to be heard on the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, Monday through Friday at 11 p.m. on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, classic1220.ca.
And we are back with my guest, author and researcher, Pat O'Connell, and going to get into kind of an interesting story here. Now, just to rehash a little bit, your brother, Jim, who's no longer with us, I understand, began to work with folks that were abductees, even started a show to allow them to spread their story, or at least share their story. And he came across this guy that he contacted you about, being an author, and his name is Clay Wheeler, and the story was bigger than he could tell. So with that, tell us more.
Well, that's right. And he said, basically, this guy has had all kinds of experiences, not just UFOs and aliens, but a lot more. And your audience is probably most familiar with Skinwalker Ranch. So there was, a mix of UFOs and aliens and ghosts and poltergeist and orbs and interdimensional portals and you name it. So this actually goes back to more like the original Skinwalker story, not the one that we're seeing on TV with all the technology. And so that's what happened. And he said, so would you be interested in vetting this guy? Make sure before I come down to Texas to film him and, see what's going on. Would you check him out? And if you think he's the real deal, would you be interested in writing a book or multiple books or a screenplay or all of the above? And I'm like, sure, that sounds really interesting. And then he said, the guy claims that he has shot and buried an alien out there. And I'm like, my eyes bugged out and I'm like, okay, I'm in. So,
Yes.
It turns out, this guy was an aircraft repair technician. He had his own business in this little bitty airport in the middle of nowhere. I mean, complete rural country, nobody around. I mean, it's not like any airport you've ever imagined. It's just basically a landing strip and a couple of buildings.
Which state was this in?
This is in Texas.
In Texas, okay.
Yeah. And so this guy, he owned a hangar, but the hangar had an apartment. He had built an apartment on the other end of the hangar building. And in the middle, there was his office. So all of this stuff happened at or around the airport. And he was seeing UFOs. He was seeing aliens. He saw... He had poltergeist events where he lost his keys and they showed up in the ceiling, in the rafters of the hangar. Now, you know what a hangar looks like. It's like 30 feet up. And how do you lose your keys up there? And
was he telling you this story, or was this coming from Jimmy right now?
No, this was, Jimmy kind of gave me the snapshot of the breadth of the craziness. And then I got in touch with Clay and I started learning all about what had gone on. And he was just like a pinball machine at first, just so happy to have somebody listen to him that didn't dismiss him and say, you're crazy, who really wanted to know. And I wanted, you and I were talking about, I'm a skeptic, but I'm open-minded. And so when I investigate something, I'm trying to sort the wheat from the chaff in a way. I want to get the garbage out of the way so that I can really focus on true mysteries and try to understand them. So that's what I wanted to do with him. And he had a lot of stories. There were some things that he experienced. He had pictures of rods, what people call rods or skyfish. And I'm sure you've heard of that. And it's really a misunderstanding. It's your camera shutter speed is too slow to freeze the movement of the wings of bugs, like a moth or something in the dark. And so it looks like a flying worm with a bunch of wings. And so, I wanted to debunk some of these things with him so that when people heard his story, they were going to believe what he saw and what he describes to them. that they're not going to just dismiss some of this stuff as, misinterpretations or whatever.
Mhm.
So, we went through, when I started working with him, we corresponded, we talked on the phone, and he sent me a whole bunch of pictures. Now, when Jimmy first told me about this, he said, this guy has all this evidence. Well, I was, salivating to see this evidence. Well, it turns out that a lot of his photos were blurry, or it was a dot in the sky and you couldn't really tell what it was. And then the things that he saw up close, he didn't get a chance to take a picture of, or he tried to take a picture and it was dark. So all he got was dark on dark. And so, a lot of the evidence I had to end up disregarding, because I ultimately believed he experienced some really extraordinary things. So at a certain point, I started telling him, forget about your pictures, forget about, there were a few things that are interesting. But for the most part, just tell me what you experienced with your own eyes, not through a camera, not through a scope, not through, whatever, night vision goggles or whatever.
Let me ask you this real quick. You weren't happy with the evidence, and I understand that this is in Texas, and I understand your concern about it, letting the exact spot out. So I won't ask you about that so much. But what about him then made you believe him with the lack of evidence? What about him caused you to think he was real?
There were a lot of things, and really, kind of the last chapter of the book, I go through trying kind of my skeptic's logic. Could it have been hallucinations? Could it have been this? Could it have been that? But there's always a but. I couldn't explain it all away. And really, when it came down to it, if you would look at him when he was talking about his experiences, and I have one clip from an interview where he's sitting in a lawn chair with the runway behind him, and I ask him, overall, was this a negative or a positive experience? And he said, well, yeah, I'd have to say it was a negative experience, because he had gotten sicker and sicker and sicker throughout the course of this experience. And, I can kind of explain some of that. But he said, I guess overall it was a negative experience. But immediately his whole manner changed, and he just kind of looked up and he said, but it was exhilarating. It was like living in the sci-fi channel every night, looking up at the sky and seeing these ships. And so you could tell that he believed it so deeply that I believed it. I believed him. And as much as I tried to dismiss some of the things that he claimed that happened or that he saw, there was always a piece that I couldn't explain away. So for me, this is still an open case. I mean, I feel like there's so much. I mean, we've got a team, and we can talk about that later, but we want to go out there and, for example, test for toxic gases, or is there something in the water that could have poisoned people in that area? Because people were experienced, not just him, people who worked at his shop, his wife, people who lived in the area were having strange experiences. They were also seeing craft. So it wasn't just him, but the skeptic in me wants to think, is there a prosaic explanation? Was there some kind of toxin in the water?
And that's an excellent direction to go in. But what did he see? You've talked about seeing things, but what did he see?
Well, he saw all kinds of UFOs. I think the first one he saw was like a pork pie hat. It was silver, kind of like a pie plate. He saw classic, he called them Mexican hat saucers. He saw an orb that he said was like a soap bubble, a giant soap bubble. And there was this one craft, and he drew some sketches of the various craft that he had seen. There were egg-shaped craft. There were some that looked like what Kenneth Arnold drew. The Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who first, he didn't really coin the term flying saucers, but he said what he saw of these ships over Mount Rainier, I think. He said they moved like saucers skipping on water, but when he drew them, they didn't look like our classic flying saucers. They were like a disc with something on the back. So Clay saw those. And then there was this other craft. He said it looked like a hard shell eyeglass case. And that one showed up on a couple of occasions. The first time it gave him, he called it the headache beam. He said it felt like a bucket of warm water was poured into him. And then after that, he got this horrible headache. And, but his friends were concerned that they were trying to kill him. He thought they were trying to communicate with him. He said, I think it's like what a computer must feel like when it's downloading data. And I thought that is such a cool concept that he would, humanize
Explain
the
it that way.
computer.
Yeah. Explain it that way. How many people, you said other people there saw these events?
Right.
If you could, and they were employees of his, people that worked at the airport. Was there a very, I know you've said it's out in the middle of nowhere, but was there a town near there?
Yeah, there's a small town, very small town.
How many people have you been able to identify that experienced things? If you could put a general number on it.
Out there?
Yeah.
Well, his mom, Clay, his mom, I have not tracked down his ex-wife yet. We talked to a friend of his who was involved in some of these things and did see some of the stuff. Now he thought, and we can talk about this, he thought it was demonic, not aliens. And he thought all of it was a manifestation of demonic forces.
That's something I would like to delve in there. Now, we're getting ready to take our next break, but just to kind of set up I want to talk about this next session is, was he ever abducted? Did he ever see aliens? What was his experiences with those aliens? Also, how did everybody come together? Your brother Clay, and not only your brother's not with us, I understand Clay has also passed on also.
Yes.
So, I'd like to chat about all of that when we come back after this break. So, folks, lots of things to talk about. Clay Wheeler and his UFO abduction experiences. So stay with us. We'll be back right after these messages. Welcome back, everybody, with my guest tonight, Pat O'Connell, sharing with us a very fascinating story. So your brother who has experiences gets a hold of you, asks you to check out this guy, Clay Walker, that had an experience that he'd like to feature on the production that he's doing for television. You go out there, you interview him, you start getting some information. I've got to tell you, I'm impressed with the fact that you want to get out there, test the soil, test water, find logical answers for this, because some fascinating stories, and I don't doubt that you believe them, but right now we don't have any evidence.
Right.
But now he started also talking to you about actually seeing aliens, possibly being abducted. So pick it up there and share with us what happened, what he saw, what he experienced.
Right. Well, just to back up a little bit, there were these behavior changes, and this is how the demonic forces or this demonic concept came in. And it seemed like everybody who would, he said his employees, when they clock in at the airport, they would, their personality would go dark. And the one who was most affected apparently by it was his wife. And there were several occasions where her personality completely went dark, to the point where he felt that she was she was a victim of some kind of demonic possession. So the first occasion was they had a fight, and he went out to her truck. She was leaving, and she slammed his hand in the door and then dragged him from the truck for like 1.5 miles, and he ended up with broken ribs and 2 broken arms and a broken leg, and abrasions. Okay. And ended up in the hospital anyway. And then another time she woke up, she looked like she was 8 months pregnant, and he first of all, was scared to death for her, because what can cause a bump on your belly this big? What kind of, she have been bitten by something or whatever, and he wanted to get her to the hospital. But she was eating raw meat out of the refrigerator, and he said her voice got really deep. And that day that she woke up looking pregnant, he tried to convince her to go to the hospital, and she wouldn't go, and ended up kicking him in the head. He fell down, hit his head, and he was knocked out for a while. When he came to, she was gone.
Mhm.
And when she came back several hours later, it was gone. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing was that he had said, you need to go stay with your sister, because this place is affecting you. This is not good for you. It's not good for anybody. And so she was gone staying with her sister, but she showed up at the airport one day and started with a 38 special gun,
Mhm.
and started shooting everybody. And fortunately, she didn't hit anybody, but she ended up being arrested. And after that, he got divorced. So now, to answer your question, now he's living there by himself. And that's when he started seeing aliens. The first time happened, it was the middle of the night. He woke up, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and he couldn't sleep. And he thought, well, I'll just call my sister, because she was working in China at the time. So it's the middle of the day for her. So he calls, and he's chatting with her, and he's just kind of pacing around the living room and just fidgeting. And he goes and he reaches for the door that goes from his apartment into the office that's between the apartment and the hangar. And he opens the door, and on his left, there are two little gray aliens. And he said all of this happened in a few seconds, but it just etched in his mind. He said he opened the door, and he said these two aliens moved out of the way as if they were like a gate on a hinge, and he thought that was really weird. So that, to me, was one of those weird things that who would make that up? If you're lying or
Mhm.
you're hallucinating, where do you get that? So and then so he looked at the two little aliens, and then he looks over to his right, and there's this tall alien who was tan skin, and he said he was naked, but he had no features. So it was like a Ken doll. It was a blank slate. The eyes were huge. The lids, top and bottom, had bulges in the back of the head. And he said, and this thing lunged toward him. And he said he knew right away this was the bodyguard for the two little guys. And when this thing lunged toward him, he freaked out, backed out, closed the door, and dropped the phone. Well, I found out later his sister said he actually said, "Gotta go." And I don't know whether he canceled the call, ended the call, or she did, but whatever it was. So that was his first encounter with aliens.
Did he say anything over the phone to his sister? Did he snap a picture with the cell phone? Do we have any
No,
nothing? And
no,
see, that's the problem both you have with the UFO side as
right.
well as I do with the ghost side. We don't have those pictures when we have the stories, and it makes it very tough to prove it.
Well, and this was in 2010. He was not the most uh, technically leading edge guy. I mean, he could do anything with gears and machines, but not so much with computers. So he had just a little old flip phone. So, in those days, the screen was like the size of a postage stamp. And he wouldn't even have thought of it at the time anyway. So that was his first encounter with aliens. And then there were other creatures, may or may not have been aliens. We don't know. There was an interdimensional portal, which is similar to the what the Skinwalker Ranch story, and that's a whole other thing. But then he started seeing these little gray aliens in the hangar, and the first one that he saw, he and his secretary were in the hangar late one night. Everybody else was gone, and they thought it was a kid in the hangar, and so they're trying to find the kid, because this is the middle of nowhere. If there's a child who's in this hangar and there's no adults looking for him. This is a serious problem. So when he finally realized that it was an alien, he had guns. We're in Texas. Everybody has guns. So he's trying to, find this thing and shoot it. Well, before he had a chance to do that, this particular alien shot a blue beam out of a breastplate or something in its chest. He said it was about 4 inches in diameter. And it was like a laser beam, a death beam or whatever. And it cut through everything in the hangar, planes, scaffolding, and it cut a hole through the outside wall of the hangars. And we're talking corrugated steel. And so now he knew that these things either just could kill him or wanted to kill him. So now he was really scared. So he had guns everywhere. He had guns on his workbench and he had guns on his hip. And, he was scared to death. But at the same time, he was fascinated. He wanted to know these creatures. He wanted to know what they knew. So there was this kind of a love-hate thing going on through the whole thing. So that was the first one.
Well, I got to ask this question again real quick. We've got airplanes now that are damaged by this blue beam.
Right.
He's got to answer to somebody on that. Once again, do any pictures, evidence, insurance claims for the damage, anything?
No, he covered it up because he was, see, if you're in the aircraft, if you're a pilot or anywhere in the, that business, you answer to the FAA. You don't talk about UFOs. In fact, he denied it for a long time, and his employees kind of got mad because he wasn't saying anything, and they're thinking, am I losing my mind? And finally, it all came out, and everybody said, what happens here stays here, but we're not going to tell the FAA. So in order to file a claim, they would have had the risk of losing their license to do their business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he just ate the cost and did the repairs himself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened after that?
So then there was another alien that showed up, and there were a couple of employees who were there. This was apparently during the daytime. And now he's really trigger happy. He's nervous. He's scared. And he just reflexively shot this thing. And it falls on the floor of the hangar. And it starts bleeding out this blue stuff and outgassing something. And they're kind of coughing and choking. So he says, everybody get out. So they left the hangar. And when they came back, the thing was gone. But he said there was a rivulet etched into the concrete where the thing had bled. And he thought, okay, I'm glad because hopefully the alien paramedics came and picked him up, and he wasn't dead. He was okay. I didn't really want to hurt him, that kind of thing. But it left a helmet, and he said it wasn't like a motorcycle helmet or a NASA helmet. It was like a skull cap. You wouldn't have known that it had it on even. So I don't know why it would have. I don't know why. Why wouldn't the paramedics take take everything?
Well, so other people in the shop saw this event, obviously, correct?
Yes. According to claim.
Do we know where these people are at now?
Well, we have we have an investigator on our team, and I talked to you about him earlier. He's trying to. We did track down the one guy that saw some things and thinks that it was demonic, but we're still trying to track down some of the people who saw aliens or craft and those kinds of things. So
you said you have a former police officer on your team.
Well, he's a military investigator, former air marshal. I mean, he's a private investigator who does polygraph and all kinds of things. So he's our lead investigator. So finally there was this, to go back to what Jimmy told me at the beginning. Now there's a third alien who shows up, and he's there all by himself, and he shoots it and it falls and it's dead. And he said, I looked at this thing and I'm thinking, if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd have an alien body and I wouldn't just put it in the back of my truck and drive it all over the country, go on the Oprah show and CNN and everything I could think of, I would have said you were crazy. But he said, in that moment, I felt like this was a creature of God. This was somebody I was scared of, but I was also interested in knowing what they know. One night he packed a bag and sat out on the runway, hoping that they'd come pick him up and take him for a ride.
Never did though. He never got abducted, correct?
No, well, he said he wasn't, but some of his stories had all the hallmarks of abductions.
All right. Well, we're about ready to take our last break. So when we get back, we've now got an alien. The alien paramedics did not come and pick this one up. I want to hear what happened to him after that. So folks, stay with us. Still more to come. We'll be back after these messages. And we are back with my guest tonight, Pat O'Connell. But before we get going, I just want to remind everybody, if you'd like to check out a little bit more about the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation and Indian River Hauntings, check out our website at indianriverhauntings.com. You can also check out our website or YouTube. I'll get it out at Indian River Hauntings 2341. I can't talk tonight. But another thing you can do is if you want to get a hold of me directly here on the show, email me at ghostsky@paranormalstakeout.org. If you've got questions, thoughts, or comments you'd like to make about the show, I'll bring them up at the beginning. Just send me a note. Say hello, if nothing else, and ask some great questions. Also, if you want to see some other great programming, go to xzbn.net. That's the X Zone Radio Broadcast, Radio and Television Broadcast Network. Great shows there. That's xzbn.net. So please check out that. And Pat, how can folks find out more about you and your work? Pat, can you hear me?
Well, they can go to my brother's website, which I can. We've got a delay, apparently.
Okay.
So they can go to experiencers.com, X with just an X at the beginning, experiencers.com. And I've got a video of the book, a little book trailer video, and places you can find the book. We've got it out on ebook and paperback now, and we're working on the audiobook. Should be out in January, hopefully. So,
okay. What's the name of your book so folks can also find that?
It's called Bleed Through, A True Story of Aliens, Demons, and Pure Evil in Texas.
Okay, so do check that out, folks.
The best way to find it is to go to the website and click the link, because I've found that if you try to search on the title, it tries to give you coloring books that don't bleed through or something.
Well, we've got a little bit of a delay here, so we'll try and work through that. But what I also, before we start getting into what happened with the last alien that Clay shot, I got to ask one quick question. You made a jump earlier from aliens and demonic possession. Briefly, can you explain to me how you guys made that transition, or what made you think aliens and demons might be the same? Just briefly.
Well, I was open to whatever. Clay was the one that had the interpretation that what was happening to his wife was demonic possession, because he said she went from this very sweet personality to this very dark personality, to the point where she was, out there trying to shoot them. Mm-hmm. So, but where that concept kind of solidified was when I interviewed one of the witnesses to some of the events out there. He believed that it was all demonic. Now, Clay saw one night what he thought was an angelic creature, and he called it a plasma angel. So it was this blue light sort of undulating in his living room, he said it looked like an angel to him, except that it had brown hair. And he thought, well, wait a minute, who says angels have to have blonde hair? So it was another one of those weird little cool things that that he came up with, that But he said that during the course of this phenomenon appearing in his living room, he said there was this darker energy force that came up from the ground, which, the building was on a slab, so there's nothing underneath. And he said it came up and it seemed to overtake or seduce or attack this blue creature that he saw as an angel. And he felt like that was a demon or devil or whatever coming up. And he also said that one night he was taking pictures of what he called an interdimensional portal. And when that thing closed, he still had the camera up. So he started looking through the lens of the camera before he pulled it down to bring it inside. And he said he saw what he said looked like the devil. It was red and slick and slimy, and it was pushing itself out of the ground with its hoofs
Interesting.
on the ground. And he said it scared him to death. So he grabbed the, yeah. So that's
you
kind
said
of
he had
the
a
source of the demonic thing. But as I said,
so it sounds like that it's not necessarily their theory that they're connected. They're associating behaviors and what they've seen and making an assumption. Now, you mentioned he had a camera out. Did he get any pictures of anything when he had the camera out?
he got pictures of what he said was an interdimensional portal. I can't tell you it wasn't. I didn't see what he said came out of it. He said there were ships, there were creatures, there were aliens, there was a wolf that walked on its hind legs, came out of it. He didn't get any pictures of that. All I can see is a flare of light. And of course, again, being the skeptic, the analyst, I'm looking at, okay, are there lights out on the airfield that are motion sensor, that they would trip, that a movement would turn them on? Are there lights that come on at certain times? And he said no. Yes, I mean, the lights come on at dark and they stay on until dawn. So if that were just a case of overexposure of normal lights that kind of burned out the image, he would have been able to get that every night, all night long. But he said it only happened for an hour. So I can't, that's one of those things. I can't explain that.
Yeah.
Well,
getting back to other things that just fantastic stories here. Talk about the alien he shot and what happened, this last alien that he shot.
Yeah. So he's got this alien. He wrapped it. He said, I need to buy time. I don't know what to do. So he wrapped it up in black plastic and then put it in a box. And he said, if I keep it, it's going to decompose. I can't do that. So he takes it to his cousin's. His cousin had a restaurant that had a walk-in freezer, and he took it up and told his cousin that he had shot this feral pig, because in Texas we have pigs all over the place. So anybody who wants to kill one is welcome to. So he that's what he told his cousin, and he said, just hang on to it for a while. And so he kept it in the freezer there for a while, and then he realized that he felt like a murderer. He felt really bad about having killed this creature that he wanted to know. Now, yes, they had threatened him. And I even said, if it was a bear in your house, you would have shot it. And he said, I'm not sure, So I'm thinking this guy was a really tender-hearted guy, despite all the guns and the macho. He was very tender-hearted. And he felt like he had done wrong to this alien. So he finally goes out to gets the body back from the freezer. Cousin never knew what it was. And he brings it back and he buries it, and he performs a little, some kind of a little ceremony over it feeling like he wanted to pay his respects to this creature.
Do you know where that body was buried?
I know where he claims that it was buried. I have directions,
Have you had an opportunity to go there yet and see if it
approximate
actually
directions
exists?
to it. Yes.
Okay, so you've been out there?
Not yet, because yes, and I've assembled a team now to go out there and look for it. But the kicker is that at one point when we were interviewing, when my husband and I were out at the airport and we interviewed Clay, he told my husband, I might have booby trapped it. Now, my husband said, "Oh, okay. If
Might
you
have.
did, what would you have used?" He said, "Hand grenades." So knowing that he had a license to manufacture weapons, so he had special licenses from the ATF for handling things that normal people wouldn't. So it would not surprise me if he had the ability to have hand grenades. Now, some of the people on my team, including we have a former military bomb tech, he thinks it wouldn't be a military issue hand grenade. It would have been a dummy that Clay then packed himself.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
so we've had to look at it in terms of, first of all, we don't want anybody to know where this is because we don't want people going out there and just digging holes and blowing themselves up. So
I trust, though, when you find out, you will share that.
oh, absolutely, we'll share it with the world for sure.
Well, we've only got about 2 minutes left now. Wrap the story up. What happened to Clay
Well,
in about
so
2
the
minutes?
first thing that happened, my brother was going to come out to Texas and film and interview and dig up the body. And shortly before he came here, I got the call in the middle of the night that he had passed away in his sleep. He had a heart attack.
So sorry.
So then Clay and I were kind of lost. We continued to correspond. We continued to talk, but we were both kind of gut punched and didn't know what to do. And so about a year after he died, I made a memorial video for my brother, and I sent it out. And I sent it out to everybody who would have known him, people on social media. And I obviously sent it out to people like Clay, and I didn't hear back and didn't hear back. So I contacted Clay's sister because I thought this is unusual. I had been talking to Clay or emailing him several times a week, if not several times a day. And so it was really odd that I didn't hear from him about this because he and Jim had become very close. And so I contacted his sister and I said, "Is he okay?" And she said, "No, he's in the hospital. He has multiple organ failure and flesh-eating bacteria. And if he survives, they're going to have to cut off huge portions of his skin and do transplants on it." And then the next day she said he had passed away. So,
Well, I'm fascinated with your investigation. I really think testing water and soil out there is going to be really important to you. It's either going to give you answers or give you more questions. Either way, it's going to be very, very helpful. And we're anxious to hear what you find out about that. So,
yeah,
uh, I keep going, move forward, as it were. And we're just about done for the night. I'm hoping to have you back to hear what you find
I
as
would
the
love to.
investigation continues. And we'll talk more about it. And folks, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. We've heard a fascinating story. Always keep your mind open as well as your eyes. Take good care of yourselves. Love your family. Have a happy, happy holidays. And we'll see all of you on the other side. Have a good night, folks.